man, Bob. What are we doing today?
That is a really damn good question, Kevin. We have a special guest in studio today. Kyle Weems from Stardate Supplemental is joining us. In addition to an amazing podcast, he is also quite professional when it comes to the JavaScript world of things. So we're going to talk about flavors of the week / month / minute as it relates to JavaScript and how that makes web development somehow better. But before we get started, I want to hijack the agenda just a little bit. And we're going to talk about how our buddy Mark Zuckerberg, he's just having some pretty shitty days week after week after week. And today was an interesting one. And we're going to go around the horn and say hello. And then we're going to talk about Holocaust deniers and how Mark is apparently okay with all that. So with that being said, got a couple guys joining us today. Kevin, who's always here. Say hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
He does that regularly now. And we've got Kyle Weems joining us all the way from the west coast of the big old United States of America. Kyle, say hello and tell everybody about yourself.
Hello, I'm Kyle. Tell me about myself. I don't prepare bios. I'm a JavaScript developer. I work for Off-Road Code, who are awesome.
Multiple award-winning off-road code.
Multiple award-winning off-road code. I love JavaScript. I used to do a webcomic about a squirrel, and right now I'm doing a podcast about ships on Star Trek, because that's where the money's at, Bob, is fan podcasts about geek franchises.
Kevin and I have actually both retired our regular day gigs, and we're pulling in 0.0000 figures a week on the podcast.
That sounds about right. You're ahead of me. I'm losing money still, so...
I'm waiting to cash in my exposure dollars at Starbucks. Apparently, they don't take exposure cards.
Isn't that the same thing that those novice developers and designers are supposed to use?
Yes, exactly.
I've never gotten a single cup of coffee off that, I'll be honest.
So, Kyle, full disclosure, we bring people, celebrities like yourself, onto the show because we want to actually hit 50 listens per episode instead of the standard 20 when it's just Kevin and myself. So, no pressure.
I'm so glad to help you bring that in. I'll ask all 10 of my friends to listen.
There you go. We have many dozen friends.
Exactly.
All right. So I know we're going to talk about JavaScript today. And as someone who is terrible at JavaScript plus all other things development, I'm very excited to dive into that topic. But I want to take it a little bit more gossipy and kind of like The View for a couple seconds, if we may. So Mark Zuckerberg had another bad day today. Kevin and I have dragged Facebook over the coals, or raked over the coals, I think is the proper term, for several weeks now because they keep screwing things up.
I think in many ways, though, Bob, that might actually be sort of like part of your brand identity is dragging Facebook. Was it your first or second pod when you switched over formats? And even before that was definitely dragging Facebook. And good on you.
It's low-hanging fruit for sure. I mean, not going to lie. Kevin?
Yep. Yeah, well, I deleted my Facebook, and to be frank, I don't miss it whatsoever. I think if I got rid of my Twitter, I'd miss it. My Facebook, I just don't miss it.
How do you contact family members who live outside of your town? You got a chat app? Because I'm trying to figure it out. How do I leave Facebook?
Maybe I actually don't have an extended family, so I am like, it's like it doesn't apply to me. So maybe that's why it makes it easy to me.
I was gonna say that might be a whole new special episode of the Bob and Kevin Show where we talk about all this.
Because I got to be honest, most of my Facebook experience is Messenger, and it's purely for that reason.
So I do want to jump in here, though. Kyle, I think there's an untapped market for you on Facebook, or possibly a second podcast about what's happening in your new neighborhood situation, because you give us little glimpses and anecdotes online. And I love this Kyle's Neighborhood Sandlot kind of documentary that's going on. Tell us a little bit about your new living situation.
I think we've literally hijacked a hijack, but that's fine. So I'm really lucky. I finally am a home owner at the age of 40, barely. So just squeezed in. Way to go, me. And I live out in the countryside now in kind of a, it's not exactly a lakeside. You can't see the lake from here, but it's like a mile away, sort of a country. I don't know if it's a suburb or not. I don't know what the density has to be. Suburb. And our next door neighbor has a child whose name I don't know yet. He's like maybe 8 or 9, but I call him Billy.
Oh, you made that up?
I made that up. I really don't know what his name is. He's talked to me about squirrels once. It's the only, and you know, he started the combo. I was outside and he's like, starts talking about the different kinds of squirrels. So it was really important to him. And I
don't know. That's suspect to me. What is your Twitter handle again?
Right. CS Squirrel. I know. It seems weird, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and his misadventure, and this kid's bananas, honestly. So it makes it really fun to just see whatever's going on outdoors. Sometimes in my yard because there's no fence and he's not used to people living here yet. And whatever nonsense he's up to. It usually involves toy swords, killing cardboard boxes, eating shrubs. I'm not even joking, Bob. I've watched him.
Oh, I know you're not.
He's stripping down bushes, eating something. It's not fruit. I don't know if he's eating bugs off of it or leaves and it's not like casually. Like he's doing it the way a cocaine addict is looking for another bump. It's like really weird.
This is content that you could redistribute. You could totally redistribute this content.
Yeah. People keep telling me that, so I may have to start the unofficial Billy show. We'll see. It's funny stuff, and it's also their cat. It turns out it's the weird neighbor cat that keeps trying to come inside. She doesn't like our cats, but she thinks this is her house for some reason.
So full disclosure, whenever I see your Twitter handle, and I just realized this maybe a month ago, that your handle isn't CSS Squirrel, it's CS Squirrel. And because I associate you with front end, in my mind, I saw CSS on the front of the name.
It's pronounced CSS Squirrel by most people for that reason. It was an intentional portmanteau. I can't say that word right, slam it together. But that's why I always spell it out whenever I say it online.
Gotcha.
I'll never get it right otherwise.
So let's hijack the hijack one more time. You're doing a podcast with your brother, right?
Yeah. My brother Conrad. So I've got a twin brother. So we're both 40. We've both been Star Trek fans for life. And I used to run a previous podcast that originally was more web focused with a friend of mine, Dylan Wilbanks, and then kind of became more and more generically geek. But then we would never put it up. We have like 60 episodes we never uploaded. I don't know why. So I finally decided.
Wait. So you did a podcast with Dylan.
Yeah.
You never uploaded it.
Well, no, we uploaded it occasionally, but then less and less and less. I don't know if it was confidence on our part or the production time, because he used to assemble it. And now that I do it, I can see why it takes time. So, once you're the guy who has to put it together. But my brother and I had been like, hey, let's make a podcast. Well, what the heck are we going to talk about? Because we're experts on virtually nothing. And so we decided Star Trek because, in fact, we have some useless skills there. And we were going to do one about Deep Space Nine called Deep Space Wine, where we were going to drink wine and watch Deep Space Nine. But it took us...
It's so worth it right now.
Right? It took us like 2 hours, though, of our first episode. We were going to cover The Emissary, the first episode of that show. And instead, we'd only covered the 2 minutes before the initial credits where Cisco's on the Saratoga fighting the Borg cube. In
2 hours?
Yeah, see, and that was a problem, right? Because we were really excited about this random ship that shows up. And so we realized this was never going to work. And then about a week later, we're like, what if we just do that? So Stardate Supplemental is a podcast about the ships not named Enterprise. That's the gig. And we're just kind of starting with TNG, which is, as you know, is really rough in the first few seasons. And every time there's a ship that has enough of an identity to be talked about, or a space station, we hypothesize about what its life is like beyond what you see on screen, talk about what's on screen. We overgeek about Star Trek, Wikipedia articles, etc. And then at the end, we theorize how a fictional crew of the B-listers of Starfleet would handle it, the USS Hood, which is one of those Excelsior-class ships that show up a few times that, the Enterprise is always handling everything with this giant, magnificent ship. And this is like the barely also ran starship. How would they handle the situation?
Well, Kyle, and hopefully Conrad listens to this, or you can tell him, I love it because I am a huge TNG fan, and I totally agree. For me, TNG like didn't hit its stride till season 3.
Yeah.
And season 2 is like what the hell just happened?
Yeah. We're pretty excited about the next episode because we actually get to do the Klingon ship, the IKC Pach. But it's been mostly like holding on by the edge of our seats, which is good, actually. I think the worse the episode is in Star Trek, the better the podcast will be.
Oh, so. Hell yeah. Oh, hell. So I feel the need to break in just in case because, with all of our single-digit listeners, some of them may not know that TNG is the next generation.
Fair. Yeah. I assume a certain amount of technical knowledge on my podcast.
So I'm very anti-acronym, just for the record.
I want to prejudice your future content creation. I think my favorite episode, I think it's in season 3. It's Cause and Effect. I think it's where they're in a time loop where they keep getting destroyed and they.
Oh, that one's brilliant.
And
also known as Groundhog Day.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. And I want to know because they hit a ship, like the premise.
The USS Bozeman. Yeah, I know that one.
I want to know this one, so please put that in an episode.
Oh, it's on the list. I actually went through the Next Generation and kind of like went through all the episode guides and tried to list out how many different ships we could use. And throughout the whole season of the Next Generation, we'll get about 77 episodes, which is not bad, actually. And it gets actually more with Deep Space Nine and Voyager because they have a lot more ship of the week, But so that's gonna be fun. And Bozeman, I'm excited about because I'm really curious, honestly, about that giant gun sitting on the back of that thing. It's like a Miranda class, but with like a huge cannon for no good reason.
Right. The great thing about your podcast is you guys get to invent the backstory that's missing. And
yes,
right. And we do that, and it's been fun. And we've got a few local listeners that get really opinionated about it in fun response to it. So it turns out it's a worthwhile someone's listening to it. So that's been exciting. That's the weird part.
It saved my life yesterday. I'm not going to lie. I was stranded in New York. The weather was bad, and Stardate Fundamental saved my life. So
supplemental.
Sorry. My bad. Wow, true fan. Supplemental, fundamental.
First time fan, long time almost listener. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it did save my life yesterday. Quick question, asking for a friend. How much show prep do you and your brother do?
We watch the episode in question beforehand, on the week before, preferably within a couple days, but anywhere in the week beforehand. And I've done a lot of prep ahead of time on building out a list of stuff that we can just reference as like a text Bible. Sometimes we'll do notes, but honestly, they're small. And then we decide on a topic for our opening segment because we have 3 segments. We have an opening segment where we talk random crap. And then we have a segment where we talk about the ship. And we're trying to make that the big segment because sometimes it shrinks. And then we'll talk about this, what would the hood do? And it's finding out the opening segment takes some time. It's the post prep is actually the biggest thing. That takes me I've got it down to about 3 hours after the podcast. Yeah.
Do you find yourself doing a lot of editing, or is it just finding the right transitional clips?
I used to do a lot of editing. We're both inclined to say a little too often, and I try to pay attention to it. There's a little bit of heavy breathing because I don't have a filter for that yet. And I used to really kind of like scrub for that kind of thing. And yeah, exactly. And I just need to get some fancy equipment to help because I'm a bit of a mouth breather. And that took a lot of time. But nowadays, we do less of that. Every now and then we'll drop about 3 or 4 minutes of content in a segment because we go too far down the rabbit hole in a way that's not constructive for making it funny or worth listening to. And so I'll just clip those out. As far as the bumps, most of them are pre-made for like the segments. And then while I'm doing the record, while I'm listening, just making sure that the quality's fine, I'll be scrubbing through the episode and try to get like, a 6 or 7 second segment where they mention the ship's name on screen and stuff like that. So eventually we'll end up with more stuff in it, but only after I've brought down the production time. So yeah, it's fun, but most of it's post-production, not pre-production.
I know Kevin has a question, so I will follow up after his. Go ahead.
No, I actually more of a statement. We're about 3 layers on the call stack right now, so eventually we're going to have to return from these methods. Yeah, exactly. So I just want to point that out.
I'm
Bob,
actually
get that question in.
I'm actually okay with screwing the Zuckerberg conversation for this one because this is actually interesting to me. So the question was about the production and the prep, and it was related to are you worried about when you put the bumps in and you're grabbing the show content? Because Kevin and I have run into issues with our old platform. So is there a concern about the copyrighted material?
We're a commentary. Usually commentary that serves as sort of a review of content is covered under fair use.
We thought so too.
You have to be careful, but it also has to be transformative. If you have too much content, it's often considered not transformative. You're effectively playing it in the background or as you go, by which I mean we're small enough fries and we're not using a platform like YouTube. So I'm not too worried. We make it clear that we're a fan podcast on our site. And I try never to go above more than like 7 or 8 seconds of content.
Okay. So you have
our bumps all involve free, royalty-free music that is not from the episodes. So I'm also very careful about that because music's where you usually get in trouble.
I would like to point out here that Bob and I used to be on YouTube, and they have this automated detections for all this.
Right, exactly.
And that got us a few times. And believe it or not, we are actually like 3 for 3. We actually won all of our cases. But since it's an automated bot, this bot does not know between fair use, copyrighted material, etc. And watch this. Wait for it. So Zuckerberg has been asked to determine whether or not InfoWars is good or bad. And he's a human, and he can't figure it out. How the hell are we going to get some sort of bot that actually understands the nuances of human copyright and things like that? I don't know how we can.
I think that a robot is better at understanding the nuances of human behavior than Zuckerberg. I'm just going to be honest there. He does not seem to get people. And I'm not trying to say because of autism or anything like that. I know people make that accusation. I'm just saying that when you hit a certain level of geek rich, you just don't seem to care about people anymore. And he's definitely a rich geek.
First of all, I want to acknowledge best segue man in the business.
I know. That was a really clever save.
Yeah. But next, that was something that Kevin and I were speaking about earlier. He was writing down these principles. Like, just because it's your product doesn't mean it's the best idea for you to be the CEO.
I agree. I mean, well, heck, look at Papa Murphy's. No, not Papa Murphy's.
Papa John's.
Yeah. Turns out their CEO has a tendency, or at least has on one occasion, managed to throw out a few words that white men should never say in the middle of a big call with a lot of people. And suddenly he's not the face of their company. He's not the CEO of their company. He doesn't even allowed to have an office because he kept making it worse, kept going on TV to re-explain why it was okay. And I think they'll do better without him. It's like, I think McDonald's is a great example. Their spokesperson's a clown. I'm pretty sure the clown didn't found their restaurant.
What about Wendy's Twitter? If you're not following Wendy's Twitter, you are missing out.
I love what they do with Wendy's Twitter. Although I got to be honest, Wendy's and McDonald's gets weird. Every now and then there's like weird fan communities that do some strange stuff with Wendy. I'm just going to leave it there. But I love what they do on their Twitter. They've got so much salt, as it were.
Yeah. All about the nugs.
So do we think collectively that Facebook might go the way of a Papa John's and ask Mark to step down?
No, because I think first off, he owns the majority of it. And
he's got voting rights, and it's a public company, so it's true. I
think the rest of the board kick him out of the. So I don't think it's possible for him to be voted out unless he sells it. Am I wrong?
But earlier this year, he's already committed to selling a bunch of stock, and he believe already has. I've seen a lot of stories where a lot of companies like Apple, Google are buying their own stock back, but they're also shoveling it out the back door too, like from personal portfolios.
Right. I think I don't think Facebook can be saved by having someone other than him there, but I don't think they need saving. They're doing fine. They've given away the Western world. They've sold out democracy, and they're still making tons of money doing it.
Wow,
So,
that's two people this week that sold out democracy.
I know, right? And they're both doing okay. It's really unfortunate. There's a certain level, I think, of wealth that allows you to pretty much buy Papa John's. The guy in charge of it's probably a multimillionaire. Sold a lot of pizza. He's wealthy. He's okay. He's got some horrible Botox, whatever. But but Zuck, he's the kind of wealthy where he could give away like 9/10 of his money and still be wealthier than virtually everyone alive. And the horrible part is that him and Bezos and all these guys, most of them aren't pledging to do that. You know, I mean, I know that Zuck's saying he will, but he's going to make a bunch of schools in San Francisco or something.
I think he's committing to doing something that's not doable. You can't say we're going to figure out how to get rid of hate and know what's good and bad content for our platform. I just don't think, I mean, hell, we live in an era where the truth is somewhat negotiable. You know, it's like, wait a second. Truth is now viewed through, well, here's our version, here's your version, depending on what team you're on. And how do we know what the single truth is? Maybe I'm screwed up now. Is there even such a thing as the truth? I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think there is such a thing as the truth. And I think that it's just been good marketing by people who find the truth inconvenient to do otherwise. I mean, values can be argued, right? And I think that that's where we used to have our fight, was values, you know, conservatives, progressives, etc. But truth used to be like, okay, we agree on most of the truth and then we argue over values. And a few things people would stand down on because they thought that had gotten away their values. But now it's like everything's up for grabs. And it's going to be like that longer than I think we're comfortable. We're going to be old men by the time we finally get that figured out, I think, again. But I don't think robots are going to do it for us.
Okay,
do you think we're ever going to be able to redefine or reclaim truth at this point?
Yes. Maybe not while we're alive, but yes.
That's not good.
But it sounds like Kyle and I are in agreement that from a societal standpoint, truth is going to be a hard grasp for many a decade.
Well, it's one of those things that we're used to thinking of history as being sort of like a curve upwards, and it turns out it's a lot more punctuated, you know? So progress can go back and forth on certain kinds of areas. And I think accepting of scientific truth is, or anything related to that, is kind of up in the air now. It's like, is global warming happening? We don't know. It's like, no, we know. It's every day in the headlines there's something horrible happening somewhere because it's too hot or too strange or too different. But people want to argue over it because, you know, it gets in the way of them feeling good about themselves selling oil or whatever it is they're identifying with, coal miners, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't know. It's like you got to get politics out of the truth, but how do you do that, Bob? I don't know.
Well,
question.
We were trying to think, you know, in earlier episodes, can you program your AI or your machine learning to have morals, ethics, and values? And hell, do we need to throw the word politics in there too? You know?
Yeah, probably. And the fact is, AI is not going to save us because it's made by us. It's our child. Microsoft made that AI on Twitter, guys. Remember that one that it had to be killed in less than 48 hours?
Grounded.
It turned super racist really quick.
Maybe it is very human. Who knows?
Right? It's too human in a sense. It's learning from us. So it's like, how do you would have to make a system that was learning from a source that wasn't being infiltrated by bad actors. And then you would have to somehow give it the power to act on that truth without it being shut down by people who disagreed with it. And you can see rapidly that becomes Skynet almost, if you're not careful. Like, because people that would disagree with it would look at it as some sort of tyranny or whatever. I don't know.
But you can also see by that experiment that the influence by the people around you can actually construct the moral background or the choices made by the community that you're surrounded with. Like
Absolutely.
that bot didn't become that racist bot because it didn't have any interaction. It became that way because people trolled it basically and taught it how to be that way.
Which is part of the problem. I mean, you know, if you want to fix things, especially in our lives, you got to start with the young folk. You have to start with impressionable people, and you have to teach them how to tell the difference between the truth and falsehoods and give them a value system where truth is more important than other factors, or at least as important as other factors, and then that way you can sort of inoculate them against that sort of influence later, right?
So a parallel thing, but not really parallel at all, but I'm going to use this to try to be another great segue, is that we live in an environment where it seems like it's not nearly as frequent as it was maybe 12 months ago, but we have a new and seemingly quote unquote better way to do JavaScript coming out about every 9 days. So
good segue. A little rough, Bob. I'm gonna give you a B.
No, you got to stretch. People got to work with me here, but we need to get back to the topic at hand.
We need a sound effect for a great segue or a bad segue. So,
Yeah,
maybe the price is right.
Wah, wah, wah. But seriously, we have everybody coming out with these ideas. These frameworks exist and come into development because somebody had a better idea, right? To make things better. So we got inundated probably, 2 to 3 years ago with a new framework literally almost every other day.
It's got to be more than that now, Bob. I mean, remember Moo Tools?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I don't think I even had enough time to use Moo Tools. Knockout.
Ember,
which I believe still exists in a sense of there's a community there. Angular, of course.
React.
Yeah, React. And this is all deeply influential in my life as a developer. I ended up as the JavaScript guy back when I worked for Mindfly, when it existed, a company that was based here in Bellingham, for those that don't know. And I ended up on the JavaScript team, and it was mostly vanilla, and then it was jQuery, because jQuery was the hot thing then. It was, it was still new. We didn't have a lot of the stuff like Query Selector baked in the browsers yet or anything like that. And then after a couple of years of that, Angular was the new hot thing, and Umbraco was going to put it in their back office. And my boss said, well, we're going to be putting it in the back office of the CMS we're using. You have to learn to use it in all front-end projects. And it was like mandated, like immediately, full stop. This big bid we made using jQuery, you're not allowed to use jQuery, learn Angular. I'm going to be honest, that hurt.
So here's my first question. Here's my first question. So because a framework works in the back office, does that necessarily facilitate its use for front-end display?
Probably not. I mean, they can. It's really about user experience and sort of like what are you trying to accomplish. I don't think back office and client side or user exposed are the same question, because they're both being used by users, just different kinds of users. It's more like the needs. I hate Angular. Probably in part because how I was forced to use it. And I know that it's all in the Umbraco back office, so deeply entwined that there's no way we're going to get it out until, I think they said the earliest they'll even consider it is version 10. And I think that's them being polite to me. I don't think that's the end.
How can they even foresee version 10?
Well, I mean, you have to look ahead. They know what they need to do for 8. And so they probably know what they need to fix for 9.
Program note, Umbraco is a CMS from Denmark. Back to you, guys.
Right. Not everyone listens to that. We all have, at various points in our careers, worked with Umbraco CMS. My company, Off-Road Code, that I currently work for.
Award-winning,
multiple award-winning Off-Road Code. Most of our projects, not all, but most of our projects involve Umbraco as the CMS we build on. Anyway, and that's horrifying to me, Bob, because Angular is it's highly opinionated. You were talking about the right way to do things. Angular was one of those examples where they built JavaScript that acted very different because it forces you to do a lot of things with dependency injections and a lot of things with the way it bound data to static to elements on the website, etc., that you had to do it one way or close to one way. There wasn't a lot of flexibility. And JavaScripters weren't used to being forced to so rigorously adhere to a doctrine. And honestly, the documentation is a nightmare. And has always been a nightmare.
I was actually telling somebody last night when I was trapped in the airport that JavaScript is pretty much one of those things that lets you get away with all kinds of really bad practices, but
It's
you
like
can still
the
get a result.
PHP of the front end, man.
Right, but to an extent, I don't think that the bad practice thing is bad because it gives a lot of forgiveness for new people. Someone that may not have the same rigorous, training that other folks have. And ideally, what will happen is the senior developer on a team will use it as an opportunity to help bring you up to speed over time. But if you can make it work, then it'll keep you interested long enough to figure out how to make it work better.
Yeah, you get
That's kind of how I look at it.
You get a lot of discussions from quote unquote true developers about how you negotiate JavaScript world.
I would like to defend the front end a little bit. Not that it's being attacked right now, but so historically I'm a C# guy, but I've had to do a lot of JavaScript. So I actually really love JavaScript.
I love JavaScript.
So in the beginning we had Vanilla.js, but it wasn't called Vanilla.js. It was just called
Right, because that's a relatively young framework called Vanilla.js.
Right.
And then we had jQuery. Like, holy crap! You mean I don't have to write all this weird, like, very verbose stuff to do this very, like, seemingly trivial thing that takes all this code? Okay, great. We like jQuery. And then we have this thing called MVVM, where all I got to do is change the model, and it just, for lack of a better term, reacts over here. And that's great, but that was such a paradigm shift. It's like, whoa, because the markup becomes declarative at this point, and then your JavaScript is your imperative language. So that was a huge switch, and it was mind blowing. But it was like, oh, I did not realize that this sort of thing could even exist. And then if you've never done Silverlight, remember Silverlight?
I do remember Silverlight.
So that was MVVM, but it was this like really shitty implementation where it felt like, Flash, but Microsoft's version, again, Microsoft trying to be cool too, but kind of not really. Anyway, but JavaScript kind of made it cool again with the MVVM, and I really appreciated it. And so to contrast Kyle a little bit, I actually had to learn Angular 1 because of Umbraco, but I ended up learning it and going, this ain't so bad. But I totally revolted on the front end, and I said, you know what? jQuery is still working on the front end. And you know what? And I'm that guy, because I know a lot of JavaScript people go, after Angular 1, if you use jQuery anymore, you are, insert some pejorative term over here. So full disclosure, I don't mind using jQuery on the front end and Angular on the back end. I've only made one app where I've done Angular on the front end. So, all right, back to you.
Yeah, I had to do a application as my very first Angular app that was going to be a website that managed a solar power control system in a home. So it was like a UI for handling your house's solar panel, connecting to your appliances and turning on and off levels and giving you all the details and all that. And that was my very first application, which was a nightmare. But so I some of that sting, I think, is what did it for me. But I'm with you, Kevin, in one sense. I think that the amount of hostility that's kind of become vogue for developers between frameworks is a waste of time, and honestly, a horrible place to find a reason to not like someone. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if people use jQuery, as long as it's a project where, if that's what's expected to be used, someone tells me ahead of time, and we use it right. In the same case with Angular, I prefer not to use Angular, frankly, but if it's going to be used, I'm not going to hate someone for using it. The older I get, I like to think I'm getting wiser, because I used to be more, just like you're saying, I kind of look at somebody else going, oh, your stack's not as good as my stack. And it's really for the simple reason that I'm not using your stack, I'm using my stack. But if I was using your stack, I would think my stack's better than yours, if we were right.
But the older I get, the more I look at things and I go, you know what? C# and Ruby, they can both do the same things. So why is one better than the other necessarily? Especially if one fits like a glove for you, because C# fits really well for me, but Ruby doesn't. But I know a ton of Ruby developers where, man, they just look at C# and go, that's great, but I can express myself more with Rails over here. And I backed off going, well, mine's better than yours. And then so to extend that to JavaScript frameworks, it's the same thing. Like Angular 1 didn't have dissonance with me, but Angular 2+, and I don't even know what to call it anymore, that was just like, okay, now I got to do TypeScript. You know what? Maybe now is a great time to look around and go, you know what else is out there? And to be frank, I'm looking at React going, man, I wish I could play too, because this guy I work with uses React and I would like to use React.
I like React. I use React on all my front-end applications. We even started messing around with the concept of using React in the Embraco back office on top of a translation layer with Angular. It works. Whether or not you should do it, I'm not advocating, but we did it to see if we could. It was really about it. And I'm with you. I mean, I like to think sometimes when you're a developer, especially a web developer, I kind of feel like a wizard sometimes with the cool stuff we can make the web do. And it's like, if there's a wizard that likes this one school of magic, cool on him. I'm better with this one over here, but I'm not going to hate him for using that choice. But yeah, I use a lot of React right now, but I do find it silly, kind of like the game of frustration, because what happens is if you talk about React too much in certain communities involving some of our online friends, they'll immediately like jump in with their framework instead. They'll be like, you got to use Vue, for example, Vue.js.
Yep, that one's getting popular.
You know who I'm talking about. Vue.js, you have to use Vue.js instead, and it's like, use Vue.js. I have no problem with you using that, but that's not me. And so definitely a thing. Often right now I'm using React if I need something complicated, because I really love the way that it handles data binding between your model and your the shadow DOM, really, for rendering. It allows you to do all sorts of crazy things. And I also frankly use vanilla JavaScript when it's less complicated. I rarely even use jQuery anymore because most of the features I want from it are baked in now. They're in the browser. So,
yeah. So, yeah, I look at, I kind of, you kind of look at those, year one developer, here's your code. Then year 5, it's like very complicated looking dependency.
Right.
And year 6, it's it's back to the simple. I kind of, I've gone through that cycle. I think all of us have. And I,
not me
anymore, I look at things and I go, oh, okay, that's a factory. Okay, that's just creating something. Okay, that's a model. Okay, this is okay. We're injecting something. I look at it for what it is, and I feel like I'm able to jump into any. If you just threw a language at me right now, I think I would be able to just go with it and be like, okay, well, that's what we're using. Let's just do it. Even if it were just Java, which is.
Well, that's what I love as a developer. I mean, it's almost a humble brag, but I do like that as a developer. Is if you've been around it long enough, you can jump into less familiar languages and you understand the idea of what you're trying to do. And you may not know without Google, maybe some of the command lines to write, code to write to say enhance a project if you need to fix it, but you at least can usually read the project.
Right. And syntax aside, if the developer has strong fundamentals, they should be able to jump in and play in any sandbox.
Ideally, yeah. And it's especially good if the sandbox has been well made. Nothing, how it is when you inherit a project, and there's ones where you may not agree with the direction developers took, but you're really grateful that they did it well. And then there's ones where you don't know who wrote this, but you wish they would die in a fire, and then you realize 10 minutes later it was you 2 years ago.
That is one of the great realizations. Like, who the fuck did this? Oh shit, it was me.
yeah, that has happened to me a few times, which I'll take as a good point. It means I've been growing at least.
When I take on a new framework or a new language, sometimes it is overwhelming. I go, okay, time out, take a knee, drink water. At the end of the day, all that is happening is we're taking zeros and ones from here and moving them to here. And then we have rules potentially in between called HTTP protocol, perhaps, and things like that. So, C# will implement the web just, with a 200 code, a 500, 404. And Ruby, if you're doing web stuff, I bet you it'll do it too. And I bet you, if you're doing server-side JavaScript with Express and Node, I bet you at a fundamental level, that's all it's trying to do. So if you just kind of look at it and go, 50,000 foot view. What is it? What is the generic concept behind all this? Syntax aside, like Bob's saying, you just slow down and it'll all just work out. Oh, it must be a code here. Or status code, that is. And so, yeah, I'm very, I love C# and I'm comfortable there. So that's a comfort zone thing. And JavaScript's a comfort zone thing. So if you ask me to go to the Rails stack or back to PHP, I used to do PHP. I'm gonna get really happy feet in my chair of unsettling paranoia. But not as much as maybe I would 5 years ago.
Well, that's good.
So I have a is it just me question, but sometimes
you mean for a friend?
Yeah, I'm asking for a friend. Sorry, my bad.
Is it just your friend?
When you are challenged with a new framework, when you have am I the only one, or is my friend the only one that has those moments where you're like, oh shit, that's how that's done here, and you're like, wait, maybe this might be better.
Yeah, I think so.
Moment.
Yeah, I've had those. I've switched from stuff to stuff to stuff. Like when I learned Angular after jQuery, for me, it was a really hard shift in paradigm. So it took a long time to get on board. And once I was on board, I was comfortable enough to feel like it was better to do certain things. And then when I switched to React, it was another hard shift because it kind of like unlearn what you've learned, Yoda sort of stuff. But then it was like, oh, this is way, for me, better of a way to do it. And so I've had those moments. And it makes me wonder how much past me might have been less smart than you thought he was. But yeah.
Less experienced, not less smart, just less experienced.
A little of A, a little of B. I'll take either. I'm humble enough.
So you guys are familiar with the triangle where on time, on budget, and quality, right? So
yeah,
essentially, right? So, I kind of look at frameworks that way. Well, each framework picks two, but maybe it's a different trinity of things. But so the reason it implemented this way, because it's advantage towards this particular issue, and then React may pick these two, and those might be readability, those might be extensibility, those might be performance, whatever those metrics are. So I think the reason we have a bunch of different frameworks is because each one may have picked two different ones, and
yeah,
and really it's, well, what is it that you're trying to do? But there's also that well, how are you as a developer wired? Am I Am I seeing the matrix, in front of me with this framework? And if I'm not, maybe you need to look at the other one here.
Yeah, absolutely. What I think is sad is a lot of people that aren't necessarily JavaScript centric, or even some of the people that are, they look at this proliferation of framework as a problem. They're like, I'm having to relearn XYZ all the time if I'm trying to get into this, or it's a sign that JavaScripters don't know what they're doing, et cetera. And I think instead it's kind of a healthy sign of energy. Different people are using this very versatile code base to solve problems in ways that make sense to them. Some people, Angular really fits their vibe. As you were saying, you're more comfortable, for example, with C# versus Ruby. And what's cool about JavaScript is it's been so flexible, as we can make a lot of different ways to solve problems, and anyone can pick the one they want. Yeah, there can be a loss on saving money for your company if there's too many ecosystems, there's not enough tool sets in one, but I haven't really found that to be a meaningful problem. So I think it's great. And what I really like is more and more of the people behind these frameworks are saying the same thing. They're like, we're all open source or close enough to it. We're all trying to solve the same problems. Let's be happy for each other's successes.
I've got a question for a friend. He just tweeted direct message at me, and he wants to know if you're coming from, say, a Grunt or Gulp era and looking at, say, Webpack, and going, gee, it would be interesting to know the difference without having to Google. What would you say, Kyle?
Wait. I want to put a clarifier in for friends that are listening. That
friends of the show.
Yes, friends of the show that aren't deeply into this aspect. The frameworks that Kevin just mentioned are more along the lines of automation and not so much along the lines of display and manipulation.
Yeah, they're build tools, basically. They're responsible for taking disparate parts of code and making a production script or something. Kevin, I wish I could answer that more intelligently. I know that they're task runners, right? And they behave in slightly different ways. I know that Webpack can't do all of the things, for example, that Grunt can, but it can do most of the things, and in some cases better.
I'll tell my friend.
I use Webpack because I find Webpack for JavaScripters is a very convenient way to have a bunch of distributed code or a bunch of different JavaScript files that you can cleanly link together and then do all the magic Babel ES6 stuff where you use, for those who aren't familiar, later versions of JavaScript that aren't yet baked into the browser but have been documented. You can kind of use them already and it'll transpile it converts it into the version the browser understands.
Yeah, so my coworker Taylor, he was walking me through some of that stuff. It's kind of mind blowing coming from like a vanilla JS, jQuery, Angular 1, and then boom comes the ES6 bomb, and I think there's even an ES7 or I don't know.
Yeah, it's like ES 2015 plus or something weird like that.
So I think it's neat that we can work with that, but it's like putting the cart before the horse a little bit. And I get the whole future like proofing, but are you really future proofing? Because I mean, if you look at the way Google handled Angular 2 Plus, where there's like 10 breaking changes like every before lunch and after lunch.
Yeah.
Are we setting ourselves up? Are we on the end of a really long whip that they're just going to keep changing it? We're just going to, okay, we'll update Babel again because of this. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought is, first off, Google screwed the pooch when it came to Angular 2. It was such a different beast from Angular 1. They could have given it a different name and it would have gone better.
And it could have just been a new framework. Exactly.
I remember watching online when they did the announcement in Paris a few years back, and it was like the developers were immediately like, so everything I've learned I have to throw away. And it's like, and as it turns out, that was perfect for React. React shot up because it came out at exactly the right time. Yeah, I don't know per se with regards to, say, JavaScript versioning and all that. I do know that because I use React, and React is sort of a lot of its developers and therefore a lot of its tutorials and build scripts and so on and so forth are ES6/Babel/ whatever they're calling it right now. Versions that I've gotten used to fat arrow notations. I'm really fond of let and const versus var, stuff like that. And it took me a long time to get around some of it because the documentation for people who weren't there for the conversation was like poor at explaining what, why, no, really why, and then finally how. It's still kind of crazy for JavaScripters to have to be like, okay, open up your command console, what? And start typing DOS commands in order to install your scripts that you're going to be using today. I mean, it's weird to me. But I think at the very least, these are language evolutions that have been agreed upon by the browser makers. So they are going to end up in there at some point. Maybe it is cart before the horse, but it's being compiled. So ultimately, if it works now and it doesn't work later, it won't hurt you.
So I'm going to set the table for a possibly very opinionated answer, and you can you can give me the politician duck and dodge if you want. TypeScript was invented by the same person who created C#, and TypeScript is basically a way to it's meant for Angular. I mean, that's its greatest use case, the Angular 2, to write it like this, and we'll transpile it to plain old JavaScript. And then if we contrast that against React, and React is going, well, just why don't you just learn ES6, which is JavaScript? We'll backwards compatibilize it. That's not a word. With Babel. Yeah, like, you know what I mean. I'm gonna trademark that. Okay. So in my naive view, I think it's better to use future JavaScript only wording as opposed to putting in what I call TypeScript as a shim, like this kind of, we don't really need this language, but we're using this language. What say you about all that?
You mean like TypeScript? Yeah, I don't use TypeScript, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with languages that only exist as abstractions. And that's the weird part about TypeScript. It's an abstraction from JavaScript, right? And like, I guess CoffeeScript is kind of the same.
God, and I hated CoffeeScript, and it's totally like that. And
I don't see the point of it only because, well, it's fine. Once again, it's like frameworks. If you want to go, so here's your politician dodge real brief. If you want to go and use it, no harm. But I do think it's harmful for devs that end up only learning how to use that. And then what happens is we passed the moment. You're using something that doesn't have it. Like everything I've learned in React, I may not be able to use JSX or something that's specific to it elsewhere. But all the JavaScript techniques that I've learned are going to be usable going forward. They're forward compatible.
Right, and they're framework agnostic.
Whereas I feel that a lot of the stuff that you've learned with TypeScript, because it's not a framework, it's literally a different way of writing JavaScript just because.
It's syntactical shortcutting, which doesn't teach you the true syntax.
Right, and it's only useful for that as long as you can guarantee that knowledge pipeline will last. And I don't know if they can guarantee. In fact, I guarantee they can't promise you that.
So here's a promise or a prediction, a Bob and Kevin show prediction. I don't think TypeScript's going to be a long-term thing, in my humble opinion.
Well, I don't think so.
Especially fans, don't add us.
Yeah, especially I think if Angular is its main use case, because I think Angular is, I mean, it's still got enough users, but it's clearly over the hump, and there's a life cycle on frameworks. And I don't think another framework's going to be like, TypeScript's the way to go.
Right, exactly.
So it was just kind of like shorthand.
Because they have to buy into the transpiling, right?
Yeah. It locks you into that ecosystem. The thing you can say about Babel is it's a shim for something that the browser makers have said this will go into the browser, and some of it's already there. You can use let and const, for example, in certain browsers versus say var. Some of it, I don't think fat owner notation's available everywhere yet, but
right. But it is a spec. It's a spec gap closer, is what it is.
Yes, exactly, like HTML5 was back in the day.
Kyle, I'm gonna kind of slow things down here. I'm gonna kind of talk a little slow, and I'm gonna say, hey, talk a little nerdy to me. What I want you to tell me about is JSX. Can you give me a lowdown on what JSX is?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, now that we're at Podcast After Dark, Kevin, how you doing? So JSX is. Am I slow enough? No. JSX is one of those things that as a developer initially terrified me because we're all of an age. I'm sure we all started developing at a point where the standard wars were being fought, and a huge part of that was separation of content. And so, HTML handled content, CSS handled presentation, and JavaScript handled functionality. And those lines shall never cross. It's like the Ghostbusters. If you cross the beams, you might destroy the universe. So don't do it.
Oh my God, say that again, even slower. You got this, you do got this little Barry White voice going on.
I can get a little deeper. And the problem, of course, is when JavaScript, when JSX came along, was that they decided, React, okay, we're going to put our HTML in our JavaScript. And it could be like a chocolate peanut butter sort of situation, but it wasn't, because we were taught never, ever do this. And it's like, it kind of felt dirty. It's like,
it totally sounds dirty now that you're saying it.
Am I allowed to put my HTML in my JavaScript?
Right.
And worse yet, and a lot of developers, I remember, were trying to figure out, how do I do React? Because they wanted React without JSX. And originally they would teach you how to do it. They had, here's how we recommend it, but here's how you can do it. And they don't do that anymore now. They've said, just bloody use JSX. That's already over, It is funny because, it's the HTML syntax that's inside a JavaScript function, usually being returned as sort of like a dynamic amount of markup. Right?
Yeah, it kills my sensibilities when I look at it, because you got like open parentheses and bam, angle brackets. I'm like, where's my quote?
Right?
Don't we just be a literal string? What's going on here, man?
Yeah, and that is the crazy part, because that's definitely where it's that's like non-transportable JavaScript. If React ever is gone, you're not keeping that format for sure. And it does mess with me. It's kind of weird, because if you came in from Angular, you've got your HTML file that has its mustache, brackets. That's all about the mustache. That's bringing in the bound in JavaScript. And this is almost backwards. In the middle of a JavaScript file, suddenly it's like, let's talk HTML, right? But once you get over the hump of it, it's like the way you start thinking of components as DOM modules. They were doing kind of cell-side.
What is that?
What was that?
Oh, you all weren't supposed to be able to hear that. I'm not sharing my audio from that application.
Wow.
I was doing some show production in the background, looking for some Barry White-esque music for this little segment here.
Right. You got to make sure to have that so it gets better. But yeah, I do like JavaScript. JSX after I got used to it. But it did take a bit for me to go, is this okay? But it's almost gotten too far now. There's stuff like JSS, which is like JavaScript style sheet stuff.
Well, let me stop you there because I gotta know, how does less and SAS play into all this? Where am I sticking? Is there even preprocessors in?
Oh God, stop!
world?
My brain hurts.
Well, Webpack and Grunt and Gulp all have preprocessors for that kind of thing.
Okay, so this is outside of React. So this is separating concern. This is like that dude that's not even in this. Okay.
No, like I'm saying, there's people doing weird stuff that mix those two, JavaScript and CSS. I do not. React does not. So that's good. We use mostly SAS at the company that I'm in right now. I've used less before too. Thank goodness. I think those are great. I wish CSS would just say, can we do it like this without a preprocessor?
Pardon the noob questions. So React is just updating the DOM. And I mean, are we adding classes, removing classes still?
You can. I mean, you're updating the DOM and a class is part of the DOM. So it does the shadow DOM. I couldn't even tell you what it is. It sounds kinky, but it's basically a layer behind the DOM. I have some friends who get really into a laughing fit when I try to tell them what I do for a living, and for this very reason. It's just about updating the DOM. That's all that I think React is really about, is rendering HTML and then the logic behind the scenes to tell it when or how to do so. I use a lot of Redux, for example, as a state store or logic container for it, which isn't necessary by any means, but is one of the convenient ways to do it if you're complex enough.
So let me address one of the things I think, so a critique of some of this. You hear weird stuff, and it's weird only because I haven't done one of these projects. You hear Babel, you hear React, React itself. You hear Redux, and there's probably 3 other ones that it sounds like only the cool kids know how to even speak this anymore, and I feel like I am just like a dinosaur. Well, I mean...
You're not. It took me like a year and a half to get through all of that. I was using Angular almost exclusively when I transitioned from Mindfly to a multi-award-winning off-road code, and they were using they were using exclusively React, and they were using it on a very large site of ours. That's a client that does travel packages, so it's like a big, travel destination, select your different pieces application. So it had a lot of moving pieces, and it was like very, very, very early React. So it was creaky, when I got in. And having that as my learning base was terrifying. And we were using Flux. That's what they used to call the state management technique back then. And then they invented Redux like a year later, and we're like, why did we need to change from Flux? And the trouble is, the people who invent these things suck at explaining it. Like, they don't have a good reason to tell you why they made a new thing. It turns out it was a good reason. But when they first said it, it just kind of sounded like, I thought it'd be fun. That's what it sounds like.
Right. It's just better. Just use it.
And it took me like 3 to 4 months to actually really get around to understanding Flux well enough that I could substitute it in there as state management. That felt like it was a sensible replacement, because it looked more complicated on the surface. It wasn't, it turns out. It's just that the way they explained it was very non-intuitive, because everyone wants to show you a to-do reducer or a to-do app or something like that, and no one uses a to-do app in their day-to-day, work. Right. So it's like, could you give me something that actually makes sense to use instead of a checklist that I'm clicking?
So, kind of related, is it natural to do a single page application with React, or is it not matter?
React was made, I think, with SPAs in mind. So I certainly use it for that. It's not necessary for that to be the application. I've used it for a number of big things, number of little things. I've had a few incidents where I've had unrelated React instances that are communicating with each other by sharing a single data store. I've seen people use SignalR to communicate with React, which gets really trippy. I like SignalR. I don't get to use it in enough projects, but game development's how I initially intended to be a developer, until the industry turned them all into wage slaves of the worst sort. So that was my original idea. But I do still like the notion of, what could I do with this? So, yeah.
So are you familiar with React Native?
Yes. Familiar as in, I know what it is, and I've used it a little bit.
Wait a minute. Pause.
Yep, there we go.
Why? So we have React, and then React Native came later?
Yeah, so React is React on the web. React Native is a version of React that is meant for example, smartphone operating
App
system
development.
apps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
And they're different enough that being knowledgeable in one will help you with the other, but the differences will catch you if you're not careful.
That was kind of where I was going at, because as a layperson, I see that they both include the word React, and I was fairly familiar with the second one happened to be with mobile development. But after that, I was like, man, I hope he can give me some info. So I appreciate it.
Right. And they're similar enough. I wish, if anything, that some of the HTML-like component behavior of React was in React Native, but they lean more heavily on some of probably the principles that app developers are used to for that kind of thing, for like event management and certain kinds of elements of interactive elements, etc. So that's not as immediately intuitive to me because I don't do a lot of time on mobile app development.
So it's like jQuery and jQuery mobile.
Yeah, in a way.
That too rudimentary.
Yeah, that's a good rudimentary comparison. That's probably not accurate at all.
And then there's got to be some sort of transpiler that takes it from React Native to native code.
Right. Yeah. It'll either go to Android's whatever they call it, and or to Cocoa. I don't remember what.
Right. So you've got to run it through some kind of AppVeyor type deal to put it in its true native wrapper.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Kyle, totally out of left field. You like astronomy, don't you?
I love astronomy.
And you see Bob's reaction. Where the hell did this come from? So Kyle and I, we sometimes exchange some astronomy things. So I'm a closet. I wish I were a astrophysicist. So Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of my heroes, and I totally envy the dude because he gets to talk about like cool space shit like on a daily basis
all the time.
Yeah, and he's got Star Talk Radio and all that. So I know you're into astronomy.
Yes.
If you could combine, this is just like totally on the spot, if you could combine technology and astronomy, what sort of technology would you like to work on, invent, or be a part of?
Oh, man, that's a good one. I'm really obsessed about astronomy. Right now, my biggest jam are Kuiper Belt objects, which are like Pluto and other small rocks beyond the orbit of Neptune, moons, all these tiny rocks because we found all the big planets that are nearby. There might be one farther away. So we have to kind of look at these weird tiny ones, and they turn out to be really weird. They do weird stuff. Triton has volcanism. Who would have thought? But let's see, applications. That's a tough one. I think what would be really exciting right now is if we saw the private sector get more involved in lowering the cost of exploring distant solar system objects. Because right now, it's like once every 20 years, they'll send something past Mars. Or if they do, it's almost always just to Jupiter now. Like New Horizons, they were originally going to make 2 of them. And they were going to go to 2 different targets. And then they're like, 1. So, I mean, being involved in the, operating systems or behaviors of those kinds of things would be neat, even though I suspect that the limitations of programming for hardened spaceflight compatible hardware is annoying as all heck. And of course, you're operating on something smaller than 1/4 of your phone's power, So
I think for me, that's my ultimate wet dream. If NASA or Elon or SpaceX calls me up and says, "Hey, it turns out we actually need someone to help us with this guidance system for landing on this new planet that we just discovered past, the Kuiper Belt that's affecting the sun ever so, slightly. Are you busy?" I'll be like, I am, nope, not busy. I don't care.
I will make time.
Yes. I don't care what's coming up. I will be there.
But I got to be honest, I really hope they have some good quality control teams.
Well, I have and speculating here. So the local industry where I'm at is defense. So we have like missile guidance software.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and it's written in an old language called Ada 95, which predates Java just a little bit, the year 1995. I went to college. That was the language we learned. But it's, you're right. I think there's got to be a gajillion amount of unit tests, so many faults that could happen. How does it react? How does it recover? Because there's can you turn it off and on? Probably. I mean, you might be able to. But.
Well, what I love about it is when you read about these things, is the way they treat fault states. They're pretty clever about it these days. Like, by and large, if something unexpected happens on most of these probes, it'll just be like, something weird happened, basically put itself into virtually off and just call and say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to hang out here until you tell me what I'm doing. Like New Horizon, they had a fault state less than a month before it arrived at Pluto. That's like a one-time shot, and I believe the encounter window was like less than 3 hours long. If you miss that, it's not like you get a retry again.
Yeah, and our history is pretty successful. I mean, I can't think of a whole lot of failures besides the Hubble mirror that we've had over the last few. I mean, we've probably crashed a few probes here and there.
I think the biggest profile disaster we had with the probe was the Beagle space probe. There was a conversion between, it was an ESA NASA collaboration, and there was literally, can you believe it, a kilometer-mile difference in how it was programmed versus what it was expecting. So it opened its thrusters or a parachute too late and slammed into Mars way too fast.
I was watching a doc. Oh,
I thought we lost another one in space recently, though. Like we just lost it.
Well, we lost contact with the one that landed on the asteroid because it turned away from the sun and it wasn't getting power. I forget what it was called, but we landed on the asteroid. It was like we sent the shuttle from the satellite thingy. Anyway, I'm totally screwing up my words.
No. For the record, you're talking about Philae, the spacecraft.
That's the one.
That was the lander. It's this tiny little comet lander, and it was supposed to have harpoons. It was actually Europe that made that one, so it depends who you meant by we. And yeah, it totally. I meant
the human race.
It was supposed to shoot harpoons into the comet to anchor itself because the comet is so lightweight that there was enough gravity to matter for the cases of a tiny probe, but not enough to keep it on the thing, right? And the harpoons didn't fire properly, so it
bounced off.
and it stayed on it. It eventually landed on its side, but it was like in a shadow under a rock. So They got some science, but not nearly as much. And then there was recently at least one probe from Russia to Mars that failed, which is like virtually everything Russia's ever sent to Mars fails. They did great with Venus. They had a ton of Venus landers that, of course, boiled in 2 hours like they were expected to do. But they almost always made it there. But for some reason, they've had the worst luck with Mars.
So ponder this. So in the 1960s, when we sent men off this planet outside of our orbit to the moon, we were writing software. Like I did it. The people who were writing the software were writing software that was not object-oriented. Software patterns had not yet been established. Expectations on what software should look like have not even been conceived at this point. Everything needed a line number, and it had to be printed out and looked at physically on the printout.
Dot matrix.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
It was insane. I think punch cards were partially involved too in the part of the coding. Yeah, it's insane. Right? Was it Margaret Hamilton was responsible for the lunar lander code, and it was taller than her.
I've seen the
printed out. Actually, what I remember from that is Neil Armstrong actually asked one of the old computers, which was a term back then that meant almost exclusively women who did the manual computing for the space program, double check the actual digital computer because I don't trust the digital computer on this landing solution. And she, of course, was incredibly amazing at what she did and was trusted better than it and said, yeah, no, it'll work. And he's like, okay, now I'll trust it.
I was watching a documentary that, goes to great lengths to explain the choreography for the engines being made in one area and the different stages made in different areas, and they all come together. And the Apollo program was at risk of not launching, or maybe it had been Mercury, one of those, maybe an earlier program, because the software is not yet ready. And when that briefed in the room where, hey guys, we can't launch it, we don't have the software ready. They got a bunch of dumb stares like, what are you talking about? Just don't you just do your thing?
Turn it on.
It was all completely hardware. Like, if it's going to go wrong, it's going to be the hardware. No real thoughts to, well, what if they put a bug in the software? Of course, that's a little different today.
It's really impressive how few people we managed to kill in the process, if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but in hindsight, look at the tiny number of humans we actually ran that risk with in the entire scope.
It's insane. If you want to get into one of my biggest pet peeves, it's that we have decided to take so much time between hitting the moon at all to doing anything more in space beyond low Earth orbit. And, there's all sorts of excuses about, well, what's the benefit of it? And it's like, there used to be a time where you would explore, you're really like, we're going to go across the Pacific. Why? Just to say we freaking did it. And then you got killed by, natives that you tried to steal from halfway through the journey. But, so there was some, maybe you should have thought out how to be a polite guest. But, it's like, it's funny to me that like the notion of, well, wouldn't it be just cool to have a guy go around Mars because he could?
Show note, next year is the 50th anniversary that Neil Armstrong first stepped on the moon.
And we are running out. I think there's like less than 8 of them alive now or something like that.
Yeah, and that just, I'm so just, because we're space shuttle generation, most of us here, right?
Yeah.
Or all of us?
All of us. We're all within an age of each other.
So we're space shuttle generation. You're like, fuck yeah, space shuttle, Tang, and Krista McAuliffe, and oh shit, Challenger, and Columbia. But space program, fuck yeah, America. All this, and then we're just like, oh well.
Right, and then suddenly we're not flying anything, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like what happened? So Bob and I covered the Falcon Heavy launch a few months back.
I saw that one. I actually watched that when you had the video. That was the double landing.
Yeah, and that gave me literal, genuine goosebumps. Yes, when I saw that land, because I'm like, America's back, baby. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Right. I really wish that Musk would calm down a bit, though. He's beginning to sound weird on Twitter, like uncomfortable weird.
Yeah. In general, I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, Elon, go do your thing. Then he calls somebody a pedophile. I'm like, okay, that's probably not good.
It's like maybe take a deep breath for a while.
Good on Kyle for the last great segue of the night. We can end on talking about Elon's shitty week as compared to.
This really wraps around. We're talking about rich people in a crappy week, but I think almost compared to that, Bob, I think what we forgot to say was that Zuck had a crappy week because he basically said Holocaust deniers had a right to use their app to talk or something.
Because they were doing it from a point of ignorance, which, all misinformation is coming from a point of ignorance.
Well, see, here's the thing. Holocaust denial is a crime in Germany.
Right.
In Germany, those posts do not appear on Facebook. They are being made.
Ooh. They
never appear. So when you're saying, I can't curate them, you're lying. And when you're saying, it's just a point of opinion or whatever, it's like, okay, we know that it's a crappy enough opinion that major leading democracies are like.
Aha. But, so do conspiracy theories, are they allowed on Facebook? And I have the one that will tie it all together. Did we go to the moon? Conspiracy theory.
I wondered if one of us was going to bring that up. I'm going to say that's why we've never been back, because maybe we never went.
Because, Mythbusters had a really good episode on it, and I really believe the government's too stupid to cover up something like that. So I believe we went there. But I can see some of these, people saying, and then so it's not Holocaust, it's not racism, it's did you go to the moon? It's fairly, do we allow that on Facebook?
Flat Earthers, don't add us, please.
Add us. I'll take you all on. Flat Earthers, bring it. All of you.
That is at CS Squirrel
on Twitter.
I challenge you to go to the edge of the world and then at me from there.
Yes, at the top of the ice wall. Do it.
Oh God, it gets weird now. The ice wall, Bob. The one of them launched himself on a giant ass rocket that California kept trying to stop him from doing it, so that way he could see the flat Earth. Apparently,
he only went like 1,800 feet in the air,
and really messed up his back because it was like a steam powered catapult.
But let's not forget that we have mountains that are 14,000 plus feet high, and he went 1,800 feet in the air, or something ridiculous like.
It's farther than I've gone, but I wouldn't do it that way.
I think Elon Musk should offer free rides for any flat earther. The only caveat is they got to ride on the outside of the rocket, so they can get a full view.
Sure, why not?
I think that's probably a great segue for our closing around the horn, don't you think?
I think so. I'm going to go first, so we can give Kyle maybe the last word-ish.
Good, because I don't know how this works.
We don't either, for the record.
Yeah, we're just going to kind of, spew more hot air. So
let's do it.
So Zuckerberg, bad week. I don't think he is the right guy to solve the unsolvable. So there's that. I think JavaScript is great, and I can't wait to learn React. But I really need a project to cut my teeth on. I can't just learn it in a vacuum and do my to-do app. I need a no shit, client needs this. Oh, damn. And then I think we went to the moon. Astronomy is awesome. I should have been an astrophysicist. And Kyle, you're up. Or Bob, you're up there.
Go, Bob.
Oh, well, I was going to actually just do my regular wrap up, but I will say that, Zuck had a bad week. Rich people behaving badly on social media. That's pretty much the norm these days. I am very much a young noob when it comes to JavaScript. So I am very curious to continue to learn more. Only dabbled in Angular, mostly just a jQuery and vanilla JS kind of guy. And I wanted to answer the question about if we could combine app development and astrology. And I wanted to say, hi, my name's Bob and I'm a Virgo.
Bob, if you're an astrologist, we're going to have some words.
I know, but the whole astronomy and app development, that left me pretty much just saying, hi, I'm Bob.
You had to go and talk about space magic, Bob. I am also a Virgo, which means I was born in August. That's it, late August, whatever. Like 1/12 of the human population. All right, so and nothing else. So that said, billionaires behaving badly. I'm not a fan. They're going to do it anyway. I don't think there's much to do about it. Zuck isn't going to fix Facebook's problems, but I don't think that they're going to get rid of them because I don't think they can. He is Facebook. JavaScript, I love the many frameworks out there. I don't love them all equally. I like that they're there and that people can do it. I'm really comfortable with React. I look forward to the day someone makes something better that I'm like, holy crap, I have to use it. I think that's fun, because usually it makes your job easier, and it keeps you passionate and it keeps you learning. And I like to keep learning. It makes it worth it. I love space. I too would have liked a career in space if it paid well. For the most part, most people get paid very poorly to be a scientist, sadly, and only a few make it up to the ranks that actually matter. But man, can you imagine there's those people whose job is, what do you do? I command Curiosity where to drive today. That's pretty cool, right? Yeah. It's like, what are you? I'm a Mars weather person. What do you mean? I read the weather updates from Mars from the spacecraft and try to make a prediction. I mean, meteorologist from Mars is a pretty cool job.
That'll turn heads at a cocktail party.
Right. That kind of thing. And I don't remember if there was another one. There we go.
Well, I have one more thing. And Bob, it's all up to you to
bring the lightning.